Hey, Good Sam, this is Pastor Jed. On Sunday, we continued our series on forgiveness. We asked the question, what does it mean to forgive others? It's an important question because Jesus is asking us to forgive others in the same way, to the same extent that God has forgiven us. The way that Jesus goes about this is he tells us a story. I love stories because you can't really argue with stories. You can't really argue with the people in the stories or the events in the stories. You're just drawn in. And as you're drawn in, you find yourself in the story and you find out who you should become and you find out what you should do. Jesus tells a story about a king. He has this huge kingdom. And he has all these servants in which he has entrusted his personal resources. When it's the end of the day or the end of the season, the end of the time where the books need to be cleared, he calls his servants together to settle the score. And he discovers one servant who has accrued a huge debt. I mean, we can't even put a number around this debt. It's like a trillion, zillion, Google-ish. I mean, that's kind of the number that this servant owes the king. It's more money than the king had. It's more money than the king had in circulation. It's just this number that you just can't even get your mind around. Well, the servant discovers that he's in deep trouble, and so he begs his master, he begs the king for more time, which is actually ridiculous because when you owe that much money, it doesn't matter how much time you have, you're never going to pay it back. But the king does something really amazing. He has compassion on him. He has pity on him. He releases him of the debt and he sets him free. Unfortunately, forgiveness has not dropped from that servant's head to his heart because he turns around and he finds someone who owes him money. And instead of setting that person free, instead of having compassion and pity on that person, instead of forgiving that person their debt, instead of setting them free, they take the person, they throttle the person, they throw that person into prison. Now the king hears about this and he's outraged. He's outraged because, one, he's lost all this money to begin with, and then he's outraged because he's being made a fool of. This servant who has been forgiven much forgives his servant little. He doesn't forgive at all, actually. And so ultimately, this servant is thrown back into prison, not because of his debt, but because of his unforgiveness. And then Jesus asked the question, so what kind of servant are you? Because God has forgiven us everything that we have done to rebel against him, to walk in the wrong direction, to basically spit in his face, to say, God, we don't really care about who you are or what you want to do in our lives. We're going to do it our way. God has forgiven all of that. And if God has forgiven us eternally of all of our sin, then we are to forgive those who sin against us. On Sunday, we were reminded that forgiveness, it's hard work. That's why Peter raised his hand. That's why he asked the question, how much longer, Jesus, do I have to forgive? How many times do I have to forgive? It's hard work, but this is the work that God is calling us to do. On Sunday, we were reminded that forgiveness, it doesn't happen in an instant. We don't have a forgiveness microwave that we can just hit the 30-second button, and forgiveness takes place in our own lives. Forgiveness takes place in the situations that are broken. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes steps. Sometimes you think you're making good progress in forgiveness and then you get triggered and you are reminded that you still have to keep on working to forgive someone who has hurt you and harmed you. But it's good work, and it's the work of Jesus. This Sunday, we're going to be gathering, we're concluding our series, and we're just reminded that forgiveness is forever. We're getting a good picture of who God is, and we're getting a good picture of how God removes us from our sins forever. We're also going to be asking and answering a couple of the questions that have just filtered up through this conversation. And so if you're wondering, how do you forgive someone who maybe has passed away? We're going to be answering that question. Or how do you forgive someone who's an unsafe person? We're going to be answering that question. We're going to be answering the question, how do you just keep on pressing in towards forgiveness when it's just so hard? And then we're going to be reminded again why forgiveness matters. And so I'll see you Sunday. Blessings.